Hello students, we will talk about axilla today. Specifically in this session, we will talk about the structures which forms the boundaries and contents of axilla. Out of all the contents, brachial plexus will be discussed in next session. So let us start this session. The competencies which we have to cover are identify and describe boundaries and contents of axilla. Identify, describe and demonstrate the origin, extent, course, parts, relations and branches of axillary artery and tributaries of axillary vein. Describe the anatomical groups of axillary lymph nodes and specify their area of drainage. Explain anatomical basis of enlarged axillary lymph nodes. The learning objective of today's session are that by the end of this lecture, all of you must be able to discuss the muscles which forms the anterior and posterior axillary wall and anterior and posterior axillary folds. You must be able to discuss the structures forming medial and lateral wall of axilla. You must be able to discuss the boundaries of the apex of axilla. And you must be able to discuss the origin, course and branches in case of axillary artery and tributaries in case of axillary vein. You must also be able to discuss the axillary group of lymph nodes and the area drained by them. What do we mean by saying axilla? In order to understand axilla, let us see the illustration present on the screen. Axilla, it is a pyramidal space which is bounded laterally by the medial side of upper part of the arm and medially by the upper thoracic wall having upper 4 ribs. So this represents the pyramidal space which is called as axilla. Axilla has a apex which is directed upward and medially, and it has a base which is directed downward. The base of the axilla is concave with the concavity directed downward. The base is bounded anteriorly by anterior axillary fold and posteriorly by posterior axillary fold. To understand this, let us see the illustration on the screen. Here, this is anterior axillary wall. The inferior border of the anterior axillary wall is called as anterior axillary fold. Likewise, this represents the posterior axillary wall and the inferior border of posterior axillary wall is called as posterior axillary fold. Now, in this illustration, you can see the concavity of the base of axilla, and this concavity, it is bounded anteriorly by anterior axillary fold and posteriorly by posterior axillary fold. Now students, if we draw an imaginary line parallel to the posterior axillary fold, this line will be called as posterior axillary line. Likewise, if we draw a vertical line parallel to anterior axillary fold like this will be called as anterior axillary line. If we draw another line parallel to both the anterior as well as posterior axillary line passing in between the two lines, this line will be called as mid-axillary line. This mid-axillary line passes midway between the anterior and the posterior axillary lines. Now, why are we talking about mid-axillary line? Because mid-axillary line holds clinical relevance, as in while tracing pleura and lungs, while performing pleural fluid aspiration and while performing liver biopsy, mid-axillary line is used as the reference line. Now let us once again try to understand the location and the structure of axilla by seeing the schematic representation of axilla on your screens. Here, this is the 4-sided pyramid which represents axilla. Here you can see that apex of the axilla is truncated and the base is concave. Now let us label the different boundaries, apex and base of axilla. Here, this is the apex of axilla, this is the base of axilla, this is the lateral wall of axilla, this being the medial wall of axilla, This is the anterior wall of axilla and this is the posterior wall of axilla. So I hope now the shape of axilla is clear to you. Now let us see which all are the structures which form the apex, base and different walls of axilla. We will start with the details of apex of axilla first, which act as a gateway for upper limb. To understand the boundaries of apex, let us see the rib cage on the screen. On the left side of the screen, you can see a rib cage without pectoral girdle. Pectoral girdle, which is made up of clavicle and scapula. However, on the right side of the screen, you can see a rib cage with pectoral girdle. So this is clavicle and this is scapula. Let us come back to the illustration on the left side. Here you can see that this is manubrium, this is body of the sternum. Both of them are articulating to form manubriosternal joint. You can see that this is the first rib which is articulating anteriorly with the manubrium and posteriorly with the first thoracic vertebra. This is the second rib which is articulating with the sternum at the level of manubriosternal joint, which is externally called as angle of Lewis. This is third rib, likewise this is fourth and so on. So we need to concentrate on this aperture which is called as thoracic inlet, which is a gateway for thoracic cavity. It is bounded anteriorly by the superior border of manubrium, on both the sides by inner border of first rib and posteriorly by the first thoracic vertebra. Now let us come to the illustration present on the right side of the screen. This is thoracic inlet. Lateral to thoracic inlet, we have another aperture present, a pair of aperture on both the sides. So this, in order to see this aperture well, let us see the superior aspect of the thoracic. So in this illustration, you can see the superior aspect of the rib cage with pectoral girdle. This is the thoracic inlet. On both the sides of thoracic inlet, this aperture is called as axillary inlet, also called as apex of axilla and cervicoaxillary canal. So in the illustration on the right side, you can see how nerve plexus is entering into the upper limb by passing through the apex of axilla. Apex of axilla, which is also called as cervicoaxillary canal or axillary inlet. It is triangular in profile, as you can see in the schematic representation on the screen. This is apex of axilla. Let us see the structures forming its boundaries. In this illustration, you can see this is the clavicle, this is the superior border of scapula, and this is the first rib. So this becomes the axillary inlet. Now let us see the structures which forms the boundaries. It is bounded medially by the outer border of first rib. It is bounded posteriorly by the superior border of scapula and anteriorly by the posterior border of clavicle. Structures passing through cervicoaxillary canal. In the illustration on the screen, this is thoracic inlet, lateral to which we have got axillary inlet. Let us see which all are the structures which cross the axillary inlet. Here you can see this blue color structure. This is axillary vein. This axillary vein drains the venous blood from the upper limb and then it crosses the axillary inlet. You can see this is the clavicle which forms the boundary of axillary inlet. So you can appreciate this axillary vein crossing the axillary inlet, and now it is called as subclavian vein. This red color structure is the subclavian artery, which brings arterial blood for the upper limb. This subclavian artery, it crosses the axillary inlet, and now when it enters into the axilla, the name of subclavian artery changes to axillary artery. These are the nerve plexus, which is called as brachial plexus, which also cross the axillary inlet. Along with these three structures, we have got long thoracic nerve, which also cross the axillary inlet, and lymphatics, which drain the lymph from the upper limb and the pectoral girdle. They also cross the axillary inlet. So to summarize, the structures which cross the apex of axilla, that is cervicoaxillary canal, they are subclavian artery, subclavian vein, divisions of brachial plexus, as of now, brachial plexus, long thoracic nerve, and lymphatic. Talking about the anterior wall of axilla, if we proceed from superficial to deep, then we have skin, superficial fascia, followed by pectoralis major covered by pectoral fascia, deep to which we have clavipectoral fascia which encloses two muscles, pectoralis minor and subclavius muscle. Posterior wall of axilla. It is formed from above to downward by subscapularis muscle followed by teres major and latissimus dorsi. We will read about the details of these muscles when we will study about back and scapular region. As of now, the posterior wall from above to downward is formed by subscapularis muscle followed by teres major and latissimus dorsi. Let's revise the structures forming the anterior and the posterior wall, and then let us see how anterior and posterior axillary folds are formed. This is the sagittal section of the axilla. This is the anterior side and this is the posterior side. Here you can see these are the structures forming the anterior wall of axilla. From superficial to deep they are. This is pectoralis major covered by pectoral fascia. This is pectoralis minor muscle covered by clavipectoral fascia, and this is the layer of clavipectoral fascia. The inferior border of the pectoralis major muscle along with the overlying superficial fascia and skin forms the anterior axillary fold. This cavity is the axilla along with the contents. You can see the axillary artery, axillary vein. You can also see the cut section of the nerves, which are the branches of brachial plexus. You can see these green color structure which represents the lymph node. Posteriorly, this is the scapula. Anterior to scapula, you can see the cut section of a muscle which is subscapularis. This is teres major, and inferiorly we have got latissimus dorsi. So posterior wall from above to downward is formed by subscapularis, teres major and latissimus dorsi. Latissimus dorsi and the overlying teres major along with the overlying superficial fascia and skin forms the posterior axillary fold. This illustration is to show you the medial wall of axilla, which is convex. The medial wall of the axilla is formed by upper four ribs and the intervening external intercostal muscle. First, four digitation of serratus anterior, and we have got two very important nerves present in the medial wall. One is this, which is located superficial to serratus anterior, which is long thoracic nerve, and other one is this, which is coming out from the second intercostal space in order to enter into the upper limb. This is intercostobrachial nerve. So the structures which form the medial wall are upper four ribs, intervening external intercostal muscle with the overlying fascia and serratus anterior along with the two nerves, long thoracic nerve and intercostobrachial nerve. Lateral wall of axilla is the narrowest wall where anterior and posterior wall converge. The lateral wall of axilla is formed by the upper end of the humerus where we have intertubercular sulcus. So the structures forming the lateral wall are those which insert over the intertubercular sulcus and which are contained inside the intertubercular sulcus. They are over the lateral wall of intertubercular sulcus, we have the insertion of pectoralis major. Floor of this intertubercular sulcus has got tendon of latissimus dorsi being attached, and medial wall has got teres major muscle attached. The intertubercular sulcus, the content of intertubercular sulcus is the long head of bicep brachii. So to summarize, the structures forming the lateral wall are intertubercular sulcus having the insertion of three muscles, pectoralis major, latissimus dorsi and teres major, bicep brachii and coracobrachialis. This illustration is to show you bicep brachii and coracobrachialis along with the latissimus dorsi present in the lateral wall of axilla. This is the short tendon of bicep brachii. This is the long tendon of bicep brachii. Collectively they form bicep brachii muscle. This is latissimus dorsi. You can see latissimus dorsi getting attached to the floor of intertubercular sulcus, and the short muscle is coracobrachialis. So this is how bicep brachii, coracobrachialis, latissimus dorsi along with teres major and pectoralis major muscle forms the lateral wall of axilla. Axilla consists of axillary artery and its branches, axillary vein and its tributaries, infraclavicular part of the brachial plexus, which means cords and branches of brachial plexus, long thoracic nerve, intercostobrachial nerve, axillary group of lymph nodes and lymphatic, fibrofatty tissue, and axillary tail of Spencer. This is the schematic representation of the transverse section of axilla. Here you can see that this is the cut section of the humerus. This is the posterior end of the rib where we have head, neck and tubercle of the rib. This is shaft of the rib. This is costal cartilage. This is the cut section of the scapula, and hence this is the medial side. This is the lateral side. This is the posterior side having scapula, and this is the anterior side. Now, the boundaries we can see, this is the medial boundary formed by the rib and the serratus anterior. Posteriorly, we can see scapula with the subscapularis muscle. Laterally, we can see humerus with the intertubercular sulcus with the muscles attached to it. Over the lateral wall, we can see pectoralis major muscle. Over the medial wall, we can see teres major muscle, and in the floor we can see latissimus dorsi. Also, we can see the content of the intertubercular sulcus. This is the tendon of bicep brachii. Now let us see the contents of the axilla. Here you can see this is the cut section of axillary artery. This is the cut section of axillary vein. Now you need to note here that axillary vein is in medial relation to axillary artery. Posterior to axillary artery, this is the posterior cord of brachial plexus. Lateral to axillary artery, this is lateral cord of brachial plexus, and medially this is medial cord of brachial plexus, and hence what we are seeing here is the second part of axillary artery. Now this green color line which you can see represents the axillary sheath. This axillary sheath is formed because of the prolongation of deep cervical fascia into the upper part of the axilla, enclosing the first part of the axillary artery and axillary vein. Now the point here to note is that the neurovascular structure are closer to the lateral part of the axilla compared to the medial part. Also, they are closer to the anterior wall compared to the posterior wall of the axilla. Axillary artery. To understand the extent of axillary artery, let us see the illustration on the screen. Here you can see that this is the first rib and this is the outer border of the first rib. These are the fibers of teres major muscle, and this is the inferior border of teres major muscle. Axillary artery extend from the outer border of first rib till the inferior border of teres major muscle, beyond which axillary artery is called as brachial artery. Proximal to the outer border of the first rib, axillary artery is called as subclavian artery. Hence, we can say that axillary artery is the continuation of subclavian artery beyond the outer border of first rib. Axillary artery is crossed by the fibers of pectoralis minor muscle. As a result, the artery gets divided into three parts. The part which is proximal to pectoralis minor muscle is the first part of the artery. The part of the artery which comes in relation to the pectoralis minor muscle, either superficial or deep, is the second part of the axillary artery, and the part of the artery which lies distal to the fibers of pectoralis minor, this part, is the third part of axillary artery. Now let us learn the relation of different parts of axillary artery. We will start with the first part. To understand the relation, let us see the illustration on the screen. On the left side, the pectoralis major muscle has been excised in order to expose the underlying axillary artery. So this is the first part of the axillary artery which is proximal to the fibers of pectoralis minor muscle. This first part of the axillary artery, it is related anteriorly with the clavicular head of pectoralis major, which is covered with pectoral fascia, above which we have got superficial fascia having platysma and supraclavicular nerves in the relation to first part of axillary artery. In this illustration, you can see this is cephalic vein. The cephalic vein also comes in anterior relation to axillary artery, first part of axillary artery. This illustration is to show you that this communicating loop, which is the loop in between medial pectoral nerve and lateral pectoral nerve, this communicating loop comes in anterior relation to the first part of axillary artery. So to summarize, the first part of axillary artery, it is related anteriorly with the pectoralis major muscle covered by pectoral fascia, superficial to which we have superficial fascia having platysma and supraclavicular nerve, followed by further superficially the skin. Along with that, we have got cephalic vein and communicating loop between medial and lateral pectoral nerve. Illustration on the left side of the screen is to show you the medial relation of axillary artery. Here, this blue color structure is the axillary vein, and you can see that axillary vein, it is medially related to axillary artery throughout its length. The illustration on the right side of the screen is to show you the lateral relation of the first part of axillary artery. So here we can see this is lateral cord of brachial plexus. This is posterior cord of brachial plexus. Both of them comes in lateral relation to the first part of axillary artery. Talking about the posterior relation of the first part of axillary artery, as you can see in the illustration on the screen, this first part of the axillary artery is posteriorly related with the upper two ribs and intercostal space with the external intercostal muscle and overlying fascia. First two digitations of serratus anterior with the overlying long thoracic nerve, medial cord of brachial plexus and one of its branch, medial pectoral nerve. Before seeing the relation of second part of axillary artery, let me tell you that brachial plexus, which is the plexus of spinal nerves which innervate the upper limb, has three cords: medial cord, lateral cord and posterior cord. These cords are so named on the basis of their relation with the second part of axillary artery, which means that the posterior cord is posteriorly related with the second part of axillary artery. Medial cord is medially related to the second part of axillary artery. Likewise, lateral cord is laterally related with the second part of axillary artery. With this background, let us talk about the relation of second part of axillary artery. The second part of the axillary artery, which is crossed by the fibers of pectoralis minor, is related anteriorly with the pectoralis minor, superficial to which we have pectoralis major. Further superficially, we have superficial fascia and skin. Posteriorly, the second part of axillary artery is related with the posterior cord of brachial plexus and a muscle which you can see in the illustration, this muscle. This is subscapularis muscle, which is posteriorly related with the second part of axillary artery. Medially, the axillary artery, the second part of axillary artery, is related with the axillary vein, which we talked in the previous slide. And along with the axillary vein, it also has medial cord of brachial plexus, medially related, and a branch, medial pectoral nerve. Laterally, the second part of axillary artery is related with the lateral cord of brachial plexus. Let us now talk about the relation of third part of axillary artery. This illustration is to show you the posterior and the lateral relation of the third part of axillary artery. In this is the third part of the artery which lie distal to the fibers of pectoralis minor. Here you can see that this third part of the axillary artery, it is related posteriorly with the lower fibers of subscapularis muscle. Also, you can see it is related posteriorly with the latissimus dorsi and teres major muscle. Laterally, this third part is related with the coracobrachialis. This is the cut section of coracobrachialis muscle, which is related laterally with the third part of axillary artery. Now this illustration is to show you the medial and the lateral relation of the third part of axillary artery. Medially, the third part of the artery is related with the branches of medial cord of brachial plexus, and laterally it is related with the branches of lateral cord of brachial plexus. So let us see what all we can see. This is the continuation of medial cord. Medial cord, after giving all the branches, continues as ulnar nerve. So you can see ulnar nerve related medially with the third part of axillary artery. This is medial cutaneous nerve of forearm. This is lateral cutaneous nerve of arm. These three nerves are related medially with the third part of axillary artery. These are the branches of lateral cord of brachial plexus. This is musculocutaneous nerve. This is lateral root of median nerve, which unite with the medial root of median nerve to form median nerve, which is related laterally with the third part of axillary artery. So that's all about medial and lateral relation of the artery. Anteriorly, the third part of axillary artery, it is related with the skin, superficial fascia, and lower part of pectoralis major muscle. So with this, we end up the relations of axillary artery. Let us now start with the branches of axillary artery. The first part of the axillary artery gives one branch, which is superior thoracic artery. Second part of the artery gives two branches, which are thoracoacromial artery and lateral thoracic artery. The third part of the artery gives three branches, which are subscapular artery, anterior circumflex artery, and posterior circumflex artery. Now let us see these branches in the illustration on the screen. This is first part of the axillary artery. It gives a branch which is superior thoracic artery. The superior thoracic artery is the smallest branch of axillary artery. It runs parallel to the superior border of pectoralis minor muscle and supplies arterial blood to pectoralis minor, pectoralis major, and overlying skin and fibers of deltoid. The second part of the axillary artery gives two branches. This is thoracoacromial artery. It arises from the second part. It crosses the medial border or the superior border of the pectoralis minor muscle and then pierces the clavipectoral fascia to become superficial and finally divide into pectoral branch, acromial branch, clavicular branch, and deltoid branch. Deltoid branch, which is often the branch of acromial branch of the thoracoacromial artery. This is lateral thoracic artery. The pectoral branch of the thoracoacromial artery, it descends in between the pectoralis minor and pectoralis major muscle and provide arterial blood supply to these two muscles. It supplies arterial blood to mammary gland and end by anastomosing with the branches of lateral pectoral artery and internal thoracic artery. The acromial branch crosses the coracoid process under the deltoid muscle, pierces the deltoid muscle to reach the acromial process of scapula. It ends by anastomosing with the branches of suprascapular artery, deltoid branch of thoracoacromial artery, and posterior circumflex artery. The clavicular branch of thoracoacromial artery, it ascends medially towards the medial end of the clavicle to supply arterial blood to sternoclavicular joint and subclavius muscle. The deltoid branch of the thoracoacromial artery is often the branch of acromial branch of thoracoacromial artery. It crosses the pectoralis minor muscle and then it enters into the deltopectoral groove along with the cephalic vein. This deltoid branch, it supplies arterial blood to deltoid muscle and pectoralis major muscle. The other branch of the second part of axillary artery is the lateral thoracic artery, which you can see here in the illustration. This lateral thoracic artery, it crosses the lateral border of pectoralis minor muscle to supply serratus anterior, pectoralis major and pectoralis minor, axillary lymph node and subscapularis muscle. This branch in female is larger compared to the one in male, and there in female it gives lateral memory branches. Third part of the axillary artery gives three branches: subscapular artery, anterior circumflex artery, and posterior circumflex artery. In the illustration on the screen, you can see this is subscapularis muscle, and these are the cut tendons of short head of bicep brachii and coracobrachialis. The third part of the axillary artery gives off a branch which is called as subscapular artery. The subscapular artery is the largest branch of axillary artery. Subscapular artery arises from the third part of axillary artery near the lower border of subscapularis muscle. After taking origin, it descends down parallel to the inferior border of the subscapularis muscle in order to reach the inferior angle of scapula. It participates in the formation of scapular anastomosis around the scapula. We will read about the scapular anastomosis when we will study the back and scapular region. The subscapular artery, approximately 4 cm after taking origin from the third part of the axillary artery, it divides into its two terminal branches, which are circumflex scapular artery and thoracodorsal artery. Second branch given by third part of axillary artery is the anterior circumflex artery. This artery arises from the lateral part of the axillary artery. It runs horizontally and winds round the surgical neck of the humerus anteriorly. When it reaches the intertubercular sulcus, it gives an ascending branch which provides arterial blood supply to the head of the humerus and shoulder joint. And then the artery winds round the surgical neck and end by anastomosing with the posterior circumflex humeral artery. Posterior circumflex humeral artery is larger than the anterior circumflex artery. It winds round the surgical neck of the humerus with axillary nerve by passing through the quadrangular space. This artery, it winds round the surgical neck by coming in posterior relation to the surgical neck of the humerus. It provides arterial blood supply to the shoulder joint, to the deltoid muscle, teres major, teres minor, and tricep brachii muscle. The illustration on the screen is the transverse section of axilla. So now you can identify different walls or the boundaries of axilla. The point here is that you need to note the contents of axilla here. You can see all fat here along with the lymph node. The green color structures represent the lymph node. You need to see is this structure. The white color layer is the axillary sheath, and you can see that axillary sheath is encircling the axillary artery, axillary vein, and the branches of brachial plexus. This axillary sheath is the modification of deep fascia. Specifically, it is a prolongation of prevertebral layer of deep cervical fascia. It extends up till the upper part of the axillary artery and axillary vein. It acts as a protective sheath around these neurovascular structures. A very important clinical significance of axillary sheath is that any abscess related to the vertebral column of the cervical region may track down along the axillary sheath and may descend till the axilla and may be seen as a bulge over the floor of axilla. The fibrofatty connective tissue of the axilla consists of many lymph nodes, which are arranged in 5 groups, which are anterior group of lymph nodes, posterior group of lymph nodes, lateral group of lymph nodes, central group of lymph nodes, and apical group of lymph nodes. Now let us see the details of each. Anterior group of lymph nodes. They are 3 to 5 in number. They are located on the medial wall of axilla along the lateral thoracic vein. This lateral thoracic vein runs parallel to the lateral thoracic artery, which is located along the lower border of the pectoralis minor. As you can see in the illustration here, this is pectoralis minor and this is the lower border, that is inferior border of the pectoralis minor. Here you can see this is lateral thoracic vein, and the lymph nodes here, they are called as anterior group of lymph nodes. These lymph nodes are responsible to drain the lymph from the anterior thoracic wall, from the major part of the mammary gland and the subareolar plexus. Also, axillary tail of Spencer is in contact with these group of lymph nodes, which holds a clinical relevance. Posterior group of axillary lymph nodes are 6 to 7 in number. They are located along the posterior wall of axilla along subscapular vein. As you can see in the illustration here, this is axillary vein and this is subscapular vein. These lymph nodes are posterior group of lymph nodes. They are responsible to drain the lymph from the back and the scapular region and from axillary tail of Spencer. Lateral group of axillary lymph nodes. These are 4 to 6 in number. They are present on the lateral wall of axilla along the axillary vein. So as you can see in the illustration, this is axillary vein and these group of lymph nodes, they are called as lateral group of lymph node, also called as humeral group of lymph nodes. They are responsible to drain the lymph from the upper limb except the area drained by the lymphatics which run parallel to cephalic vein, as these lymphatic drain their lymph directly into apical and infraclavicular group of lymph nodes. Central group of axillary lymph nodes. These lymph nodes are 3 to 4 in number. They are located deep to pectoralis minor muscle near the base of axilla. Over the base of the axilla, they are located along the second part of the axillary artery and axillary vein. These central group of lymph nodes, they drain the lymph from anterior, posterior and lateral group of axillary lymph node, and finally the lymph from these lymph node goes to apical group of lymph nodes. So in the illustration on the screen, these are central group of lymph node. They are located deep to pectoralis minor along the second part of axillary artery and axillary vein. These central group of lymph nodes, they are located in relation with the intercostobrachial nerve, and this relation holds clinical relevance. Apical group of axillary lymph nodes. They are so called because they are located at the apex of axilla, medial to the axillary vein and the first part of axillary artery. They drain the lymph from all other axillary lymph node and from the lymphatics which run parallel to cephalic vein. These apical group of lymph node, they drain their lymph into the subclavian lymphatic trunk. However, few of the lymphatics drain the lymph into infraclavicular and supraclavicular group of lymph nodes. Now let us focus on the illustration present on the screen. These are apical group of axillary lymph nodes here in relation with the apex of the axilla. This is a schematic representation to show you the direction of flow of lymph. This represents the pectoral group of lymph node which drain the lymph from the pectoral region and mammary gland. This represents the lateral group of lymph node which drains the lymph from the upper limb except those areas which are drained by the lymphatic which run parallel to cephalic vein. The lateral group of lymph node and pectoral group of lymph node drain their lymph into central group of lymph node. This represents the posterior group of lymph node which drains the lymph from the back and scapular region and finally drain the lymph into central group of lymph node. From the central group of lymph node, the lymph is drained into the apical group of lymph node which are located at the apex of axilla. From apical group of lymph node, the lymph is drained into subclavian lymphatic trunk. However, few of the lymphatics drain into the supraclavicular and infraclavicular group of lymph node, which finally drains into the subclavian lymphatic trunk. Few points to be highlighted at this point. The apical and the infraclavicular group of lymph node, they are located deep to clavipectoral fascia. The apical group of axillary lymph node on the right side, they drain into subclavian lymphatic trunk. However, on the left side, the apical group of axillary lymph node drain into thoracic duct. Clinically, the axillary lymph node are divided into 3 groups. They are level 1, level 2 and level 3. Level 1 include those group of lymph node which are located along the inferior border of pectoralis minor. Level 2 include those group of lymph node which are located deep to pectoralis minor, and level 3 include those group of lymph nodes which are located along the upper border of pectoralis minor. Now there is a term called as sentinel node. Sentinel node implies the first lymph node which receives the lymph from the area of the mammary gland involved by carcinoma. Axillary vein. Axillary vein extends from the inferior border of teres major muscle up till the outer border of the first rib. You can better understand this by seeing this illustration. Here, these are the fibers of teres major muscle and this is the inferior border of teres major. Axillary vein extend from the inferior border of teres major up till the outer border of the first rib, beyond which this axillary vein is called as subclavian vein. The axillary vein is formed by the union of basilic vein with the two brachial veins. The brachial vein which ascend parallel to the brachial artery. And these three veins unite at the level of inferior border of teres major. Just like axillary artery, axillary vein is also divided into three parts by this triangular muscle which is pectoralis minor. The name of the three parts correspond to those of the axillary artery, which means that the first part of the axillary vein extend from the superior border of pectoralis minor up till the outer border of the first rib. The second part extend in relation to pectoralis minor, either superficial or deep, and the third part extend from the inferior border of teres major till the inferior border of pectoralis minor muscle. Talking about the tributaries of axillary vein, the tributaries of the axillary vein corresponds to the branches of axillary artery with few exceptions. The veins corresponding to the branches of thoracoacromial artery. They do not merge to form a common trunk. Rather, few of them drain into axillary vein, whereas the rest drain into cephalic vein. The axillary vein receives either directly or indirectly thoracoepigastric veins. These veins are formed by the anastomosis between superficial vein over the inguinal region and lateral thoracic vein. Now let us start with various clinically significant conditions related to axilla. We will start with winging of scapula. This condition, winging of scapula, occur when injury to long thoracic nerve, which is also called as nerve of Bell, occurs. Long thoracic nerve is responsible to provide motor nerve fibers to serratus anterior muscle, and whenever injury to this nerve, long thoracic nerve, occurs, paralysis of serratus anterior occurs, because of which a condition arises which is called as winging of scapula. Now let us talk about the anatomical basis of winging of scapula. For that, we will first talk about normal course and relation of long thoracic nerve, followed by the action of serratus anterior muscle in the body and what happens when this muscle gets paralyzed. To understand the normal course and relation of the long thoracic nerve, let us see the illustration present on the right side of the screen. Here you can see this yellow color structure. This is long thoracic nerve. This long thoracic nerve, which is also known as nerve of Bell, it is so called because of its long course over the medial wall of axilla. It arises from the roots of the brachial plexus and it has the root values C3, C4 and C5. After taking origin, this long thoracic nerve crosses the axillary inlet and enters into the axilla. In the axilla, it descends down by lying along the medial wall of axilla. And in the medial wall of axilla, this nerve is placed superficial to serratus anterior muscle. So this is the long thoracic nerve and these are the digitations of serratus anterior muscle. So you can see that the nerve is placed superficial to the serratus anterior muscle, and because of this superficial placement of this nerve, it becomes prone to get injured whenever any stab injury occur to the medial wall of axilla. Now let us see the actions of serratus anterior muscle. Serratus anterior is the prime agonist for protraction of scapula, which means that because of the contraction of serratus anterior muscle, the medial border of the scapula is pulled away from the midline. Also, because of the contraction of this muscle, the medial border of scapula is pulled anterior towards the thoracic wall. As a result, this medial border of scapula remain opposed to the thoracic wall. Now, in order to understand protraction better, let us see the short video clip on the right side. Here you can see that because of the contraction of the muscle, the medial border is being pulled away from the midline. This is called as protraction of scapula. And when does this occur? Whenever any pushing movement is performed or any punching movement is performed. As you can see on the left side of the video clip, the person, she's pushing the floor right now. That is while performing push-up movements, protraction of scapula occurs. Also, the medial border is pushed anteriorly in order to keep the scapula opposed to the thoracic wall. Next function of serratus anterior is to cause lateral rotation of scapula, which occurs when inferior fibers of the serratus anterior, which attaches to the costal surface of the inferior angle of scapula, contracts. When these lower fibers, lower 4 to 5 digitations of serratus anterior contracts, they pull the inferior angle laterally. As a result, glenoid cavity faces upward. And when does this occur? Whenever overhead abduction at shoulder joint is performed. To understand this better, let us see the short video clip on the right side. Here you can see that when overhead abduction occurs at the shoulder joint, the lower 4 to 5 digitations which insert over the inferior angle pulls the inferior angle of scapula laterally, that is away from the midline. As a result, glenoid cavity faces upward. This is called as lateral rotation of scapula, which is facilitated by serratus anterior muscle. Now, why is this condition called as winging of scapula? Because whenever a patient with paralysis of serratus anterior muscle pushes anything anterior like a wall or performs the punching movement, at that time serratus anterior fails to pull the medial border of scapula anteriorly against the thoracic wall. As a result, the muscles which are attached to the dorsal surface of the medial border, that is rhomboids, their action become prominent, and as a result, the medial border of scapula is pulled posteriorly. As you can see in the illustration here, the medial border of the scapula is protruding outward, that is protruding posteriorly. This is because of the paralysis of serratus anterior, which is now not able to pull this border anteriorly. As a result, the border is pushed or pulled posteriorly because of the action of rhomboids. So, winging of scapula, if we summarize, this condition arises because of the injury to long thoracic nerve. As a result, paralysis of serratus anterior muscle occurs, which normally keeps the medial border of scapula opposed to the thoracic wall. And when the muscle gets paralyzed, this medial border is pulled backward posteriorly, and it appears that the patient is having wings on his back, and hence the condition is known as winging of scapula. Next clinical condition is related to the muscles which form the anterior wall of axilla, and they are pectoralis major muscle and pectoralis minor muscle. Sometimes congenitally both these muscles may be absent in the anterior wall of axilla, and whenever this occurs, it occurs bilaterally. So this condition in which congenitally pectoralis major and pectoralis minor are absent, this condition is known as Poland's syndrome. In cases with hypotensive shock, when peripheral vein could not be assessed for intravenous infusions, in those cases, axillary vein is the vein of choice for cannulation, and specifically, first part of axillary vein is used. Now, what is the site where we can assess or cannulate this axillary vein? As you can see in this illustration, This is clavicle, and in the infraclavicular region along the mid-clavicular line, the incision has been placed in order to expose the axillary vein, which here lies anteromedial to the axillary artery. So axillary vein can be approached easily in the infraclavicular region. Now, which all are the conditions in which this axillary vein is assessed? Whenever the physician has to insert a pacemaker wire in the right atrium, then this can be passed through axillary vein. Whenever long-term venous access has to be done in ICU patients, or whenever the patient is in hypotensive shock, or whenever central venous pressure has to be monitored, in all these cases, first part of axillary artery is cannulated. The cannula is then passed in the subclavian vein, and then the tip of the cannula reaches the right atrium. Brachial plexus block. The anatomical basis of giving brachial plexus block during surgical procedures involving upper limb is that the axillary vessels, cords and branches of brachial plexus, these all are enclosed by axillary sheath. We know that axillary sheath is formed due to prolongation of prevertebral layer of deep cervical fascia into the axilla. When anesthetic drug is injected around the cords and branches of brachial plexus enclosed by the axillary sheath, the neurons get anesthetized and the drug is prevented from diffusion by the axillary sheath. Now, this brachial plexus block can be given either supraclavicular or infraclavicular. As you can see in the illustration here, this procedure is performed under ultrasound guidance. So this is the probe of ultrasound, and you can see this is the spinal needle giving the anesthetic drugs in supraclavicular fossa. So this is clavicle and this is the spinal needle injecting the anesthetic drug. And in this illustration you can see this is axillary sheath, and inside the axillary sheath you can see this is the cut section of axillary artery, and these are the cords and the branches of brachial plexus. Infection in the upper limb may result in infection and suppuration of axillary group of lymph node. As we know that the lymph from the upper limb is drained into the axillary group of lymph node, and primarily the lateral group of axillary lymph nodes, except the area drained by those lymphatics which run parallel to the cephalic vein, as these lymphatics drain their lymph directly into apical group of lymph nodes. Now, in neglected cases, the infection of the lymph node may get converted into axillary abscess. In these cases, the incision in order to drain the abscess has to be placed over the floor of axilla, as the floor of the axilla is the most dependent part of the axilla. Now, what will be the site where the incision must be placed? The incision over the floor of the axilla must be placed midway between anterior and posterior axillary fold, closer to the medial wall of axilla, as we know that the neurovascular structures are located closer to the lateral wall of axilla compared to the medial wall. So incision should be placed closer to the medial wall in order to prevent injury to the neurovascular structures. We know that anterior group of axillary lymph nodes are located in close proximity with the axillary tail of Spencer, and hence any enlargement in the anterior group of axillary lymph node may be misdiagnosed as the enlargement related to axillary tail of Spencer. Likewise, the central group of axillary lymph node are located in close proximity with the intercostobrachial nerve, which provides cutaneous innervation over the floor of the axilla and upper part of the medial surface of the arm. Because of the enlargement of the central group of axillary lymph node, compression of intercostobrachial nerve may occur, and this may result in paresthesia over the floor of the axilla and upper part of the medial surface of the arm. Students, you might be surprised to know that cardiac pain may be felt over the left pectoral region, left shoulder region, and medial side of the left arm and left forearm. Now, why is it so? Understand the anatomical basis of cardiac pain being referred to ulnar side of the arm and forearm, you need to consider two facts. The cardiac plexus consists of sympathetic fibers which comes from first to fourth thoracic spinal segment. The lateral cutaneous branch of second thoracic spinal segment, which is also called as intercostobrachial nerve, supplies skin over the floor of axilla. This intercostobrachial nerve also gives communicating fibers to the medial cutaneous nerve of the arm. We will see the details of medial cutaneous nerve of the arm when we will talk about brachial plexus. As of now, you need to consider these two facts. Now students, the sensory fibers from the heart run parallel to the sympathetic fibers to enter into the spinal cord. The body of these sensory fibers is located in the dorsal root ganglion of first and second thoracic spinal segments. Simultaneously, sensory fibers also come from the floor of the axilla, medial side of the arm and forearm to enter into the spinal cord, the body of which are again located in the dorsal root ganglion of first and second thoracic spinal segments. Now, the central processes of both these sensory neurons carrying the sensation from the heart and carrying the sensation from the medial side of the arm and forearm. The central processes of both these neurons will then ascend upward, will cross the thalamus and will enter into the cerebral cortex. Now, the brain will detect the sensory input, but the brain won't be able to distinguish the sites from where these inputs are coming. So, when the input is coming from the heart, the brain may misdiagnose it as the input coming from the medial side of the arm and the forearm, and hence the patient suffering from ischemia of the myocardium may complain of pain coming from the medial side of the arm and forearm, and this phenomenon is called as referred pain. This means the pain of the myocardium is being referred to the medial side of the arm and forearm. Angiography, which implies imaging of the arteries. In this procedure, the radio contrast dye is injected into the blood vessel in order to check the patency of the blood vessel. And when is it done? Before performing arteriovenous fistula, as in the patients with chronic renal failure, before performing dialysis. Trauma to the arteries in the upper limb may occur in conditions like fracture of the first rib or anterior dislocation of the humerus. In these two conditions, axillary artery may get ruptured. With this, we end up this session. Thank you.